I'm Rick from Carthage Classic Cars. On this video, we're back on this 1969 Charger. If you saw the last video on this car, we did the frame rails, both front and rear. We did the torsion bar support. We did rocker panels. We did front leaf spring mounts. We did rear shackle mounts and rear shock mount and the cross rail. If you haven't seen that, go back and take a look at that. That would be step one in the process of basically this full build Charger. Obviously, we have some of the inner frame structure still left. Some of it's gonna be replaced and are just used as jig pieces to align certain panels and everything else. Now, on this video is a quick continuation from our point of view. We're gonna let the video sit. We got other projects coming out. So realistically, this Charger is probably further along than you're seeing it on YouTube. Check out our Facebook page, Carthage Classic Cars, because we have been posting more of this car and the process, how it's coming along more up to date versus YouTube videos. But since that last video, we had the whole floor pans fit up beforehand. We pulled those back apart, we welded up all the parts, and since then, now we went through and we sandblasted the entire floor structure in this car. On this video, we are gonna install that floor structure. What it's gonna consist of is gonna be the rear seat pan first. We are gonna probably then work our way to the main floor and the toe pans, just because we are still doing a couple things on the rear trunk pan. Usually I'll do the rear seat pan, go ahead and do the rear trunk floor and then the main floor. Again, the toe pans connect between the two, so it doesn't matter which way we go. And I do have from that video all my alignment screws where everything's supposed to go, and just to make sure everything's lined up. So I'll verify all those are in the right spot before the final weld up, verify everything's straight. Like I said, this should be a pretty straightforward video. All our holes are pre-drilled, everything else beforehand, that was done all in the test fitting phase. As far as marking the bottom of these panels with a paint marker, knowing exactly where all the frame rails are, then we flip it over, I mark exactly, and I go ahead and drill exactly where I want to drill and put our rosette holes. And like you said, you'll see the parts have actually been on this car, the floor pans that I've just described, over 3 times right now. So I don't really foresee any issues. In case I forget, we are up here on the torsion bar support. We are not going to weld the center of it. I've said it on the last video, there's going to be an aftermarket driveline on this car, and we don't know, there is some modification done to the torsion bar cross member. So as we're building this car, it's really good to know what route the owners are going to go, because that changes some of the labor involved in this. For instance, I know we are going to have to cut out the center portion of this torsion bar cross member. So what we do is, if we know we're going to replace that, it would stink to go ahead and weld that whole thing in. And how we build these cars, we build them not to take apart. So if we welded that whole thing in, then we have to grind, we're just making a whole mess. If I know from this point to this point, we're going to cut that bar out, we're going to skip over those welds, we even pre-drill the holes, we'll be able to cut the torsion bar cross member down the road, and then we'll add the parts needed for the driveline install. This again is what helps us if you have a clear-cut plan from start to finish on what the car is. So many times when owners change their minds, again, we do work with that. I'm not saying that, you know, we're gonna say no if usually the owners add more stuff and just, you know, like the process that the car's going, and a good idea fairy kicks in and then they wanna add something else. But usually that ends up costing a lot more, because it kind of gets us out of the swing of things and we have to redo certain things that we're going to do. This goes for aftermarket suspensions, mini tubs. Even on this car, we are going to prep some of the areas for subframe connectors, knowing now that this car will get them. So we'll be able to, you know, put our weld through primer so we don't epoxy it, and then have to come back through, sand it back down to bare metal, and then add the weld through primer. So knowing exactly what the build process is going to be does make it more efficient. So that about wraps up the intro on this car. Let's go ahead and start putting in all the floor pans on this car and let this thing start come together. It's going to be a short, quick video to the point on what we're doing. That's how we're going to do this car. They're going to be small, quick segments, a quick intro, and then an outro of the work being done. We'll continue building the car and just put out the videos a little at a time. So stay tuned, let's get to work. So like I showed you on the pictures and the intro and the video, what we talked about, all these parts were put in our sandblast cabinet. We were able to get all the E-coat off of them. Once everything was down to bare metal, you could see on some of the parts and everything that we did, we put weld through primer, for instance, on all the areas that I know are going to be welded on and are going to be mated up between the frame rails and everything else. So we don't want to put epoxy in those areas and have it burn out. So the only thing that we did put on, like I said, is a weld through primer. All our holes were pre-drilled and the frame rails were traced out on the initial test fit of all the floor pans. So like I said, this is now the fourth time that all these parts are going together. We did test fit them initially when we were putting the frame rails, the cross rail, everything on it, because that's kind of setting the distance on everything else. We want to make sure the rockers are in the right place coming up from the firewall. So a lot of these cars, we have to build 4 steps in advance, then start removing parts. And then when we put them back together, they have to go to the exact same process to know that everything is fitting and working together, right? So now that I know this last time where our screw holes are, that our frame rails are in the right spot, everything's been checked with all the floor pans and everything else, we can sit there and do our final install. Like I said, we got our rear seat pan in there. We did start the welding process of the rear seat pan just because it's easier for me to stand up, sit down in the whole area, and then weld up the rear seat pan. Then I could sit there and start installing the main floor pan where, you know, I don't have to stand on top of the bare metal and jump around it as much with my arms and everything. I will say, you see with the bare metal parts, we are trying to wear gloves at all times. The greases and oils from your hands, even if you don't have sweaty hands, they really do amplify the rust, and it'll show up within a few hours sometimes. I mean, if you really do wash your hands really well, it might be the next day or so, but we're trying everything we can at this point to make sure that now that this is clean metal, it stays clean metal till the build process is over. Since we started this process too, I will tell you, it is 100% been focused on this car. We've been nonstop. So that's how we do a lot of these builds in the shop, is when we do come up with a plan that we're going to tackle that portion of the build, we'll start sandblasting right then and there, and we'll have someone sandblasting the parts, and we'll come back through. I'll be assembling the parts and then just go into this car full force until it is finally ready to get in the paint booth. And we don't rush the job, but we try to get as efficiently as we can just to make sure we're beating any kind of surface rust. We are in North Carolina. There are humid days. It's certain times of year that are worse than others. But back to the video itself. Now you know how we do our prep process and everything else. You can see our main floor pans taken in there. We have our rear seat pan already welded in, and we're sitting there and we're putting the toe pans underneath the rear seat pan, but on top of the main floor pan. This is a lot different than like the E-bodies we normally do, that the rear foot pans will sit on top of both areas. So that's something we have to remember every time we do the charge. We got to flip it out because we get so used to doing things a certain way. But as you could see, the driver's side and the passenger side sits on top of the driver's side. Everything kind of just fits in there. I just leave the first couple holes of the rear seat pan where they're not welded in, and we can slide right under. Everything again is screwed in, test fit, pulled up on the seat pans and everything, just to make sure everything, you know, is settled down and it's going to look nice at the end. We'll show you a video on that walking around this whole thing. Now that we have the rear seat pans and everything, we're going to turn our attention to the gas tank parts, the straps and everything for the gas tank. We are going to put those in first, and it was the same thing for the trunk pan. You can see we traced off all where the MIG rosette holes are going to go. We drilled them out, we prepped everything, and then when it goes back on the car, as long as we align our screw holes, and everything will be straight, and our rosette holes will line up with just the frame rails. Like I said, it's easier for me to do the gas tank straps right now since it's upside down, and then we could just weld it, clean it up, slide the whole trunk pan on into the charger area, and like I said, again, line up our screw holes, get everything fit up. We'll go ahead and clamp it, verify everything is straight in the car and where it wants to be, and then
once we're all done, like I said, we could come back through and weld everything else. I haven't welded anything yet on the foot pans except the parts that went under parts. So that's one thing we missed in the beginning. The main floor pan where the toe pans overlap, we did weld the 2-3 inches up, and then we added weld through primer before we put the toe pans on there, just knowing that we had to weld behind it. So there are certain areas up in the front area we did kind of touch here or there that we knew other parts were overlapping. But besides that, like I told you in the beginning of the video, I did weld the rear seat pan just for convenience, so we didn't have to jump up there as much. It was easier to weld, and when you're more comfortable welding, I feel like the job comes out a lot better. Again, going back to the sandblasting and on the welding phase, when everything is blasted and prepped, I feel like the welds do come out a lot better. There's a lot less impurities in the welds. You have a lot easier time when you clean them up. The job looks a lot smoother. And again, we'll go over that at the end. I'll show some walk around videos of it in the epoxy primer, and you could see what I mean. I mean, realistically, this car will have no filler, just bare metal, 2 coats of epoxy, and you'll see it already looks pretty good before even like a 2K primer. So we are going to start the weld through process now that everything is verified fitting from the rear to the front. We did test fit and take some measurements of the other parts in the area just to make sure that these floors were jiving. But like I said, everything fits good. We're going to start on the rear, cross brace right here. I'd like to start in the center, working my way out. You could see I did also put a lot of screws in this floor pan. So I do like using the clamps as much as possible and clamps the vice grips in more parts than the screws, because I don't have to come back through everywhere with a screw. I do have to come underneath and actually MIG weld the bottom too, because you will see that hole a little bit if you look close enough. So like I said, anywhere I have to do a screw, I'd have to weld the top, and I have to come back through and climb under the car. Obviously there's certain areas that on this charger the vice grips won't clamp efficiently or will not reach, so that's where I choose the screws. We just put a bunch of screws because the less of two evils is to climb under there, weld up a little hole on the bottom, but at least I know the whole trunk pan, floor pan, everything is tight against the frame rails. Again, that is key. You don't want anything lifting off the frame rails. You want everything tight. When they're tight, your welds are going to come out better. So you could see we do have all the MIG rosette holes on the trunk floor, and I am going to do the back of this tail panel with the spot welder. I would like to get the whole thing with the spot welder. However, I already know there's a bunch of areas around the rear frame rail mounts and everything that my spot welder just doesn't reach, so I didn't want it to look really weird where we have spot welds in certain areas and not spot welds, especially since this car is more of a pro touring car. So realistically, we can clean up this trunk floor, and I believe the owner will be super happy with not seeing any spot welds or half a spot weld. So like I said, a lot of times what we do with these B-body trunk floors, we'll actually come back through with a single side spot weld, clean up the whole floor, make it look really smooth. Then I come back with the single side, which is more of a cosmetic spot weld. It's not structurally holding anything, but I can put them gapped, the 4 inches apart or whatever, a factory B-body would have looked like, spread them out that distance. And then if someone does open it, it looks like, the Mopar hasn't had its trunk floor changed out. If you know anything about Mopars, I barely have ever seen a Mopar. Some of the best condition Mopars really need a trunk floor. So more than likely, if you have a Mopar, the trunk floor either needs to be replaced or it's still kind of got rust pits in it. So now that everything's done on the welding, we did do front to rear welding, rear to front welding. We're going to come back through one time now and start belt sanding everything. I start the sanding process with an 80 grit on the belt sander. You can use, a lot of times if I do have some really high spots, we'll take the grinding stone to it. I think you have a easier chance of just gouging up the metal and putting deep scratches in your welds, even though it does go a little bit quicker. When I use the belt sander, I have more control. You can see right now everything is in the belt sander 80 grit, and I'm coming back through now with the spot welders on the seat brackets. We're going to hit a couple of those areas now that, you know, we're kind of just running through, making sure we got all the brackets, tree, everything else in the floor pan. And then, like I said, now all the spot welds are ground down with the 80 grit on the sandpaper. We are going to come back through with the Roloc, you know, circle surface prep sanding disc, and we're going to go hit it with 120 just to smooth out all the scratches, get everything cleaned up. And then right before we hit the paint booth, I'm going to go over all the areas one more time. Just one, make sure there's no surface rust trying to form that we don't see, but we're going to hit with the 80 grit on the DA. We won't do all the sandblasted parts. We'll focus on the flat areas that are really efficient. And the only reason we're even doing this is just because it's set out for 24 hours. Again, this is the next day right now. We're getting ready that this job will be primed tonight. It might be later in the night because it's so hot in the day, so it might be midnight that we're actually priming this car because, you know, the daytime is way too hot for epoxy primer. But I know right now we are going to finish the bracketry on the sides right now. We'll finish DA sanding it, get everything in the booth as the shop's closing up, and then I'll come back in the middle of the night when it's cooled down to the perfect temperature for priming, and we will go ahead and prime this charger. As we're putting the wire holders and everything in this charger, we're also putting the rear seat brackets in there. I did keep them off the original car, and how I cut them out, I left a reference hole just so they go back exactly in this same car in the exact same spot. So that's what I do with a lot of these parts that I know we are reproducing and putting back in the car. I'll just pick some kind of floor pan hole or some reference mark where an indentation is. That's what we'll go back to install the next parts on. So you could see that right there. I did mark them. We'll go ahead and tack 4 corners in, weld the rear seat brackets in, and then we'll come back. Same thing on this side with the wire covers on the edge. You could see the whole idea is the groove where the wires come in, they'll go right up the door jamb pillars because that's where the wires would go up, and then same thing in the back. There's a spot that they would run up over the wheel houses that, you know, you really want to align there. But realistically, these fit in the corner. We're just going to MIG weld them in, and then what I'll do, I'll fold them up as we're priming. Once we prime both sides of them, we will fold them all the way back. Just as we're jumping in and out of the car, we don't want to accidentally have them keep moving because there is a good chance they are a little bit weaker that they can break. So like I said, once they're folded up out of the way, as we're jumping around this car, building the rest of it, no big deal. The final thing that we are going to install on the metalwork right now is going to be the spare tire bracket. So same thing, I did keep the original spare tire bracket on the trunk floor cutout, and I just measured off that as, you know, we're building this car, and got these 2 brackets on the side where the tire goes and lays against in the exact same spot that it originally was on this car. So same thing, we'll go ahead and just weld these up. I try to kind of just put welds on it, and again, these will go what the owner wants and everything. For this one, I welded the whole thing. I know the factory does little kind of ugly stitch welds in there, so if I do have a owner that I know that wants more of that factory look, we will try to replicate that. As far as what this owner wants, we are good just welding them for the most part straight through and trying to just do a nicer job on them. So again, the different builds are dictated on certain things, and you're going to see down the end of the video that this is not going to be a factory car, so we're not super worried about things like that. It's function over form and, you know, originality looking. So saying that, again, this is the middle of the night right now. It's real late where it's cooled down in the middle of summer and everything in the North Carolina heat. So right now we're going to go ahead and put our Omni MP 171 white epoxy on the bare metal. Like I said, this is after the DA 80 grit sandpaper and everything was done on it, so everything's been prepped out, taped off where we put our weld through primer for our other areas, and we're going to put 2 coats of epoxy primer on the top of the floor, and the same thing, we're going to run 2 coats on the bottom. So let's go ahead and wrap up this video, do a quick walk around and an outro on all the work that's done on this short amount of time with this video.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the video on the trunk pan, the floor pan, the rear seat pan, the toe pans on the 69 Charger. As you can see, I got the mini tubs in this car. I got some other test pieces fit with the trunk extensions, and the firewall cowl panel is also test fit into place. I actually forgot to do the outro video on this car. You know, we focus on mostly building the car, so kind of just round robbing. As soon as it was done, a couple days later, we started on the mini tub install, and I just realized I forgot to do the video. So you're gonna be a catch up. I'm gonna show you a couple pictures of it when it finally come out right in the paint booth. As you could see, everything was in fresh epoxy. Everything you saw on the video was bare metal. As far as this whole job, we did do the job one time, had it all in epoxy pretty much the next day. So that's how we like to do things on these projects. We like to, you know, pre-plan everything, test fit our parts that we know we're gonna prepare to install next. So you can see everything on black for the most part in the front end, possibly these trunk drop-offs and the mini tubs. We won't weld in the mini tubs, but we will have to take them out and weld the whole mini tub itself. So we'll show you a little bit more on that video. As far as the mini tubs, I will go over because I'm not actually gonna film on it. I did take the original, you know, this rib on the B-body cars on the trunk floor. It goes all the way around to the front. We did cut them out, you know, on both sides. We kind of squared them off. And then what I did, I moved that whole section in 3 inches. So basically when we're looking at the mini tubs, it kind of keeps that B-body curvature here. We did B-rolled a piece to continue down this area. And just like I said, when someone looks in the trunk of this Charger, I mean, realistically, you're gonna see these things are huge compared to the factory wheelhouses. However, it's not gonna stand out as much as far as, you know, it's not just a flat seam. On a lot of other cars, especially the GM cars, we will just weld up, but the trunk pan at this area is completely flush, and I think it looks better when we just weld it in. As like I said, with the B-bodies, I think it would look really weird to get rid of these ribs or have them up or down. So that's why I went around doing the mini tubs that way. I think in general, it looks really good. You saw also, we did put the trunk brackets in this car. I mean, we'll do a walk around the rest of the video on this thing right now. You could see, I mean, we have been welding, jumping on this trunk pan, so it's not perfect, but underneath the car and everything, everything's smooth, everything's in epoxy, the white epoxy. We did put the weld through primer where we are gonna do the subframe connectors on the main floor, so we left a wide area for that. Again, stripping the epoxy would just be a lot harder. We did also cut off the door jambs to test fit the front end of the other pieces. You saw they're really rusted in the first video if you go back and see that. But like I said, we'll go over all that in depth on the next video. You obviously see where the next video is gonna go. I really think this Charger is coming together. We have a good, solid, straight base platform. And realistically, if you think about, if you go back to, you know, the first cut down video, all we had were just this inner structure. Now on this Charger, we have the whole frame structure, you know, cross rails, shock towers, front frame rails, torsion bar support. We put the rockers in this car. That was on the first video. On this video, like you said, we quickly, I mean, it was a big job. On the video, we try to, you know, surpass the time and just show how the process is done, the trunk fan, the rear seat pan, the toe pans, and the floor pan. And like I said, looking at this car, I think it's over-engineered. I think it's overbuilt versus a factory Charger. I think with the mini tubs, I know the #1 comments on this is saying we're trying to build a Charger, like a factory replicated Charger, that we're trying to fake people. Obviously with the mini tubs, we're being real open and honest that this is gonna be more of a pro touring car. It's not gonna be a factory original car. The owner wants this, you know, over the top build, a good solid platform that he doesn't have to worry about for years and years to come. So I believe we've accomplished this. Again, if you still see screws on the transmission tunnel, that's going to show you we are putting an aftermarket transmission in this car also. So like I said, hopefully you like this video, hopefully enjoy this video on this 69 Charger. I'm really excited where it's going to go. Like I said, I'm really excited to get the next video. We're already working on it right now. So we'll start the filming on that one. We're ready to start, you know, blasting all those parts down, and they shouldn't be too bad to weld up with the spot welder. That's the thing about the trunk pan and the floor pans. We really can't get the spot welder in these areas efficiently. So we really rely on the MIG welding with the grinding down, which it works. It does a good job. Like I said, everything's smooth here. It just takes a while to grind, weld all those rosette holes, especially since we're putting a lot more than factory. Also, I do want to point out this car has no filler anywhere on it, and that goes for any car in the metal phase in this whole shop right here that we're in right now. Any car in this shop, unless it just arrived, like a CUDA on the lift, it has no filler from our shop, that when it leaves the metal portion before it starts the bodywork phase, everything is in bare metal. So we're showing all the work and all the gapping and everything else. So please check out our Facebook page, Carthage Classic Cars. We've obviously already posted the build along on this car and where we're looking forward. So if you are excited and see this project and other projects in the shop, some that we don't film right now. For instance, if you look up on the lift right here, we got a 70 CUDA, factory original car, 440 car. We're not going to do any filming on it, but we'll post a lot of pictures on that car. It's a really cool car. It's not a huge build, but like I said, there's a lot of stuff on Facebook and everything that, you know, we will post more than the YouTube channel just to show the work we're doing. So please like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube videos, and we'll see you on the next video on this Charger or some of the other cars in the shop. I'm Rick from Carthage Classic Cars, and we'll see you next time.